Shenzhen roller coaster collision. Official changes story, 28 injured and many others in ICU. Many hospitals in China are overcrowded with patients waiting in line all night. Wave of tribute for Keqiang sweeps the nation. Hefei witnesses midnight lockdowns and Chengdu sees arrest. Multiple viruses are circulating at the same time, and fever clinics in many places in mainland China are overcrowded. More and more young people are stopping Social Security payments. Who will support the retired elderly? Shenzhen roller coaster collision. Official changes story, 28 injured and many others in ICU. A recent roller coaster accident at Shenzhen's Happy Valley theme park has provoked outrage over attempted cover-ups by officials. On October 27, two roller coasters collided, injuring many riders. The opaque handling shows the Chinese government's lack of transparency and accountability. Initial reports stated only 8 suffered minor injuries. This suspiciously low number was soon contradicted as more victims surfaced. The public decried Happy Valley's gross underreporting, questioning if officials deliberately downplayed the severity to dodge repercussions. Indeed, accident scale impacts official liability. The lower the reported injuries, the lighter the incident, and the fewer consequences for officials. Happy Valley's credibility plummeted further when the injury tally abruptly jumped to 28 2 days later. The authorities belatedly admitted 4 were critically injured, with craniocerebral damage and pelvic fractures requiring ICU care. Another 13 sustained moderate trauma like soft tissue contusions and minor fractures. The delayed update sparked outrage over perceived cover-up attempts. Critics blasted the park's piecemeal disclosure as evasive and misleading, casually raising the victim count by over triple the initial figure reeked of dishonesty. Many lambasted officials' lack of transparency and accountability to the public. Netizens also questioned the inconsistent math. On the first night, 8 injuries supposedly overwhelmed Hong Kong University Hospital, but suddenly 17 hospitalized plus 11 discharged equaled the original 8. Such dubious arithmetic insulted public intelligence. Many connected the deceit to perverse bureaucratic incentives. Minimizing reported casualties translates into lower incident grades, insulating officials from fallout. Thus, bureaucrats habitually downplay disasters to preserve positions at the cost of truth and accountability. The Happy Valley fiasco epitomizes the Chinese system's endemic flaws. Bureaucrats default to opacity and deception to escape consequences for incompetence and cover their own interests. But this comes at the price of public trust and safety. Only by upholding transparency and accountability can China progress to a truly modern society. Many hospitals in China are overcrowded with patients waiting in line all night. Overflowing pediatric emergency rooms and fever clinics full of coughing and crying children are being reported in Beijing, Shanghai, and cities across China. Images show hundreds of sick children receiving IV drips while sitting on the floor as hospitals have run out of beds. Desperate parents are lining up overnight, some arriving at 3 or 4 a.m. just for the chance to be seen the next day. The outbreak appears completely out of control based on numerous first-hand accounts. At one Beijing hospital, the waiting list exceeded 800 patients. Pediatricians describe patient loads 3 to 4 times higher than normal. Despite this, one shamefully claimed we haven't reached the turning point yet, indicating the worst is still to come. Even more disturbing are reports that elderly patients are also flooding hospitals. Given their vulnerability, this all but guarantees many needless deaths in the coming weeks and months due to the CCP's negligence and dishonesty. Rather than take responsibility, the Chinese Communist Party is trying to rewrite history, insisting these illnesses are merely mycoplasma pneumonia, not COVID-19. They seem to have learned nothing from the outbreak in Wuhan years ago that was allowed to spiral out of control when transparency could have saved lives. The CCP continues prioritizing its image over human health and safety. While Chinese citizens suffer, state media publishes deceptive reports about mycoplasma cases, conveniently omitting mentions of COVID despite clear evidence showing otherwise. The CCP's lies and inaction have already allowed COVID to spread unchecked for months. But even now, they continue downplaying the pandemic rather than taking urgent steps to protect the public. Their disregard for human life is appalling. As the outbreak worsens, the CP tightens its grip over information, censoring critics and accounts that contradict official narratives. They seem intent on controlling the narrative rather than the virus. Wave of tribute for Li Keqiang sweeps the nation. Hefei witnesses midnight lockdowns and Chengdu sees arrest. The passing of former Chinese Premier Li Keqiang has sparked a grassroots memorial movement across China that the authorities are struggling to control. Following Li's death in Shanghai on October 27, people started gathering spontaneously near his former residence on Hongxing Road in Hefei to mourn and lay flowers. Despite government efforts to ban and suppress the memorials, they have quickly spread to major cities across China, including Beijing, Shanghai, Chengdu, and as far as Hong Kong. The public mourning has clearly alarmed Beijing, which imposed strict information controls after Li's death and banned public gatherings for a week. In Hefei, mourners continued showing up at Hongxing Road late into the nights of October 30 and 31, leading to tense standoffs with authorities. There are reports of police blocking off the area on the 31st to clear away crowds and piles of flowers left by the public. Schools in Hefei have taken the highly unusual step of calling parents to warn them not to participate. In Chengdu, some citizens were detained for trying to lay flowers at a public park after mobilizing on social media. Beijing authorities have pressured flower delivery platforms to stop sending orders to prominent memorial sites. Other cities are restricting flower purchases and deploying police to monitor mourners. But the makeshift memorials have persisted, with citizens finding creative ways to express their grief, dissent, and defiance. Drivers across China are posting veiled mourning messages on their cars. Marathon runners competed with photos of Li on their backs, and virtual memorial groups quickly formed to coordinate defiance, even as Chinese social media censors work to block and disband them. In their effort to suppress the memorials, the jittery authorities reveal their deep insecurity and fears about any seeds of organized dissent, but their heavy-handed response will likely only fuel more public grievances. The situation shows the lengths the Chinese government will go to stifle any challenges to its control, no matter how ordinary civilians choose to grieve. Multiple viruses are circulating at the same time, and fever clinics in many places in mainland China are overcrowded. Mycoplasma pneumonia continues to ravage mainland China, causing misery and fear among the population. Hospitals across the country are overwhelmed with patients as infections skyrocket, many being children. Besides mycoplasma, other viruses like influenza, COVID-19, and norovirus are also spreading. Long waits up to 6 hours in emergency rooms are now common, with some hospitals having 400 to 500 patients daily, 3 to 4 times more than before. At the famous Beijing Children's Hospital, waits of over 900 are reported. Half of the students in some kindergarten classes have fallen ill. Her capital, Beijing, is hard hit, with even prestigious hospitals like Tianjin Hospital and Sino-Japanese Friendship hospitals seeing pediatric departments and fever clinics filled to bursting. Coughing and crying children abound, with the youngest infants even having to wait in strollers in crowded hallways. The elderly also suffer, their weaker immune systems being ravaged by both bacterial and viral assaults. Mycoplasma thrives in the immunocompromised. This gratuitous suffering is directly caused by the Chinese Communist Party's botched initial response to the outbreak. Their instinctual secrecy and suppression allowed contagion to spread unchecked. The party fears transparency and acts only to maintain power, ignoring the well-being of the people. Chinese netizens share tragic stories online of entire families infected but are quickly censored. The party seeks to control the narrative rather than control disease. State media downplay the crisis even as the health system drowns. Thoughts as a peak is yet to come as the pathogen spreads rapidly in crowded cities, feeding on millions denied herd immunity by ruthless zero-COVID policies. Especially vulnerable are the impoverished rural migrants condemned to squalid urban fringes by China's permanent underclass system. While the CCP elite access top medical care, Ordinary Chinese must languish in horrific conditions not seen since the days of Mao. Lies and negligence by communist authorities have rendered the people defenseless against preventable illness. Decades of crystalline corruption and willful technocratic ineptitude have led to this moment. Without fundamental political change, such crises will only worsen. For the sake of ordinary Chinese who deserve so much better, the CCP regime must be held accountable. More and more young people are stopping Social Security payments. Who will support the retired elderly? The Social Security system in China is faltering as more people discontinuing payments, imperiling retirement livelihoods. This phenomenon spans demographics, young and middle-aged, migrant and flexibly employed. Reasons are multifaceted but point to a dysfunctional system. Younger generations are short-sighted, prioritizing careers over retirement planning, and without trust in opaque policies vulnerable to embezzlement and shifting conditions, many see little incentive to participate. Overall lack of risk awareness and long-term planning also drive non-payment. Consequences for individuals are stark. Forgoing medical insurance brings unaffordable treatment costs and pension lapses, income drops. Families shoulder more care burdens as elders risk impoverishment without pensions or couples' health crises without insurance. Societal impacts may prove disastrous. With youth exiting, aging populations explode, as do pension deficits, threatening retirement systems. Individual actions thus menace intergenerational equity and social stability. Resolutions require multifaceted efforts from stakeholders and soul-searching from citizens. Robust enforcement mechanisms must impose compulsory payments on dodging entities. Curbing noncompliance protects system health and insured rights. System reform is urgent. Boosting efficiency, service quality, and transparency could increase credibility and participation. But information barriers must also be addressed through data integration and publicity campaigns. Participation, incentives, and risk awareness may only grow through cultural change and education. Retirement requires long-term thinking, not just individual sacrifice but collective responsibility. Citizens must recognize their actions' impacts on family, community, and country.